Welcome to the Silver Screen Guide podcast. Join Corbin and Allen, along with guest hosts, as they bring their love for the cinema to discuss films from every genre and decade. Learn about the history of the film, little-known facts, and insightful explorations while they enjoy discussing your favorite film. The curtain is rising and your podcast is starting, so sit back, relax, and enjoy your guide to the silver screen. Welcome back, listeners, to the third and it's seemingly so far final installment in our Kung Fu Panda movie review series. Today we are reviewing Kung Fu Panda 3. This is your co-host Corbin.
And I'm Allen.
Listeners, if you want to know the scores, the box office, the production, why in the world it took 5 years for the third film to come out, why did they dump it in January, usually the garbage month, you want to know where we were at in our lives, it's kind of weird because we started the first movie back in 2008. We would have been in like middle school? What is that right? Probably at the end of middle school, maybe very early high school, but with the third one, we are in the middle of college. So a lot has happened between, it's been 8 years total across since the trilogy was started with the very first movie. So we talk all about that in your guide to Kung Fu Panda 3 that came out last Thursday. That's the first link in the description below. It'll take you there to listen to it. And while you're down there, make sure to follow us on Letterboxd so you can see what we are watching throughout the week. Also, we have a curated list of reviews we think you'll like to listen to after this one, but you can definitely go and explore the archives yourselves. Also, we always post the next 4 reviews of upcoming reviews in the description. Of course, you can explore the full schedule to see what is coming out throughout the year. We actually added a very cool, handy, dandy countdown to the theatrical release and countdown to the episode release. So if you're wondering when Dune comes out like I am, or you're wondering when our episode will drop, there's a countdown. That countdown's every day for you to check out. Of course, we are on all major podcast platforms, so no matter where you're listening, make sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating and a short written review. That really helps us in the rankings, helps us get noticed by other people looking for a fun movie review podcast, helps grow the Silver Screen Guide community, and it's a great free way to support us. It also helps us reach our goal of becoming verified critics on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, also, we do have some timestamps, so you can jump straight into the review or jump straight into our thoughts and or even rankings of the Kung Fu Panda trilogy. Also, we do have links to all of our social media platforms and our Patreon page, so go ahead, head over on there. It's a more intimate time for us to kind of talk one-on-one as friends. You get some great bonus content, and it financially helps us keep Silver Screen Guide running as well.
So, Corbin, were you there in the theater for Kung Fu Panda 3?
I was not in the theater for Kung Fu Panda 3. I was buried in books. I was too busy at school. Seeing Kung Fu Panda 3 was the last thing from my mind. I think it's kind of the same situation with Taken 3. I was like, oh yeah, they're making a third one. Huh. Oh, yeah, okay. I did have a mild curiosity to see the series someday. And it's been a little over 5 years since the movie came out. I haven't been itching to see it. I did actually think the movie was about Po finding a wife and having kids. And I thought, yeah, that's what I thought it was about. I thought Mei Mei would be his love interest in this movie once I saw her. I was totally wrong. I had no idea what this movie was about.
Right. Yeah, I knew it came out, and I'm pretty sure I had seen 1 and 2 by this point. And so I was like, I kind of want to see 3, but never actually saw it. In fact, I somehow was able to avoid it, even though I tried to watch it a couple of times, able to avoid it until this review. Like I mentioned, I've liked 1 and 2 and somehow never got around to watching 3 until now. So yeah, I missed it in the theater too. I knew it came out. I remember seeing trailers for it. But I never actually got to go to the theater and spend, $10, $15 and actually sitting down and watching it. But did you see these trailers, Corbin? And what do you think about them now?
I don't remember the trailers at all. I think trailer 1 is more of a teaser. For me, it's a little too hard trying to get me into the mood with Back in Black from AC/DC. It doesn't quite grab me. Trailer 2 explains the entirety of the plot. It shows me most of it. It does look like a fun adventure, but I wouldn't see it in theaters, and who knows if I would ever rent it. But no, that trailer doesn't get me in theaters, and trailer 3 gives away even more, I think. So I'm not a fan of these trailers, and I would not be there in theaters if I saw these trailers today.
Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, I remember seeing them, watching them again. I don't really remember them, but I know that I had at least seen a trailer being in the theater so much. So for me, maybe. I think because of how much I end up liking 2, I probably would be more likely to be in the theater. But I think you're right, Corbin. These trailers do give away way too much for this movie. So I probably would be in the theater. Clearly, I wasn't because I would have better things to do. But if I had a second chance, maybe I'd try to catch it in the theater, given how much I ended up liking number 2.
I will also mention it didn't grab the Academy's attention either. This one didn't get nominated for Best Animated Film.
That's right. In fact, what did get picked this year?
I did look it up. Zootopia won. You talked about how Zootopia stole the box office of that year. Yeah, it's another movie about animals, and Zootopia took home the statue. Kung Fu Panda was shut out of the Oscars, which is interesting because the first 2 were both nominated for Best Animated Feature Film. Yeah,
this is a little bit surprising that while the first 2 at least made it to the Oscars, this one somehow missed it. Of course, didn't help that Disney was back on full force this time around, because last week we noted that with Kung Fu Panda 2 there weren't any Disney or Disney Pixar movies that were at least up for Best Animated Feature that year. So Kung Fu Panda 2 seemed to miss it this time around. Looks like Academy didn't go for it.
Well, listeners, if you have not seen Kung Fu Panda 3 and you don't want the film spoiled for you, go ahead and click pause right now. Go ahead, rent the movie, and then come back and click play right here, and we'll be ready to talk about it.
In the spirit realm, Master Oogway and Kai fight. Kai wants Oogway's chi, like he stole from the other masters. With it, he can return to the mortal realm to also steal Po's chi. Meanwhile, Shifu announces that Po will begin training, as he is set to retire. Naturally, Po's first lesson goes horribly wrong. Later, when Po is visited by his biological father, who is also a panda named Lee, come to find out he's been searching for Po after hearing the message from the universe. Lee tells Po that there is a secret community of pandas hidden in the mountains. All of a sudden, the chi stolen by Kai attack the village. Po and the 5 stop them, and Po notices that they are jade zombies, or zombies, of old masters of Kung Fu. Come to find out, Kai has stolen their chi and is using them as puppets to get to Po. Po then heads with his father to the panda community where he is to learn chi. With them also comes along Mr. Ping, Po's non-biological father. Here, Po learns what it means to be a panda, waking up in the afternoon, rolling instead of walking, eating all the time, etc., thinking that this is training him to learn chi. Kai later attacks the Jade Palace, destroying the temple and the statue of Master Oogway. He takes the chi of the 5 and Master Shifu, leaving Tigress to warn Po. Come to find out, Po hadn't learned anything about chi. Lee had lied to Po so he would stay. Po develops a plan to maybe take on Kai, involving the community of pandas. But Kai arrives and Po's plan goes south. His trick to use the Wuxi finger hold only works on mortals, of which Kai is not. Po then sacrifices himself, doing the finger hold on himself, wrapping his arms around Kai's neck, sending them both to the spirit realm. The panda community gather together and use their chi to save Po from also having to become a zombie. Here, Po also truly becomes a dragon warrior and handily takes out Kai. After the defeat of Kai, Master Oogway hands over his staff to the dragon warrior, saying, "I've got a bigger one anyways." With Po taking Oogway's place, the dragon warrior then returns to the mortal world. The pandas journey to live in the village, where they continue to practice kung fu and chi as credits roll.
That plot was a tongue twister. We've got Lee, Chi, Po, Kai, all taken together. That one's a hard one to get through.
Yeah. That's also in my notes. It's kind of a jumbled mess because I would type in, Chai with a capital C because I'm used to typing in Kai, which is with a capital K.
Yep.
There's a lot there's a lot of confusion with names and whatnot in this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. But, I am happy to see we've got some more A-list talent joining the cast here. J.K. Simmons and Bryan Cranston. I had At first, I had no idea that was J.K. Simmons' voice until I figured it out eventually. And Bryan Cranston was pretty noticeable right off the bat, but he does a really good job. I've never heard him be a voice actor before, I don't think, but he fits in pretty well with these characters.
Yeah, I knew when I looked at the cast, I saw that Bryan Cranston was Lee, and I was like, man, that voice sounds so familiar. But you're right, I did not recognize at first that J.K. Simmons was Kai. But I was like, but later as the movie went on, I was like, man, that voice sounds familiar too. And then when I looked into it, of course, I was like, no way, it's J.K. Simmons. Which if you heard the background, J.K. Simmons' role was supposed to go to Mads Mikkelsen. So I think I would like to have seen Mads. I think it's actually his name. I would like to see, what he would have brought to the role. But J.K. Simmons is already, such an iconic voice, and an iconic actor that I'm happy to see him here. I think he does a good job too, because he does fit the role very well.
I can't imagine. I'm like trying to, as you're talking about it, I'm trying to picture Mads Mikkelsen voicing Kai. It just doesn't seem like it would work because there has to be like this air of playfulness to these characters, even with the villains. Mm-hmm. There has to be this kind of cartoonishness. And I don't know if Mads Mikkelsen can bring it. Maybe he can, but that would be totally different. But I do think J.K. Simmons does a good job here with this. Not quite as good as Gary Oldman in my book. I think Gary Oldman's voicing it was a little better. But it should be noted, Bryan Cranston did not voice Lee at the end of Kung Fu Panda 2. That was just a famous voice actor. He just does a lot of stuff. Sounds nothing alike if you go back and listen to him at the end of 2. Sounds totally different. But hey, it's been 5 years. Who cares? Who even remembers, right? But, now that I think about that, what a cliffhanger to leave audiences on for half a decade. I mean,
I know.
Kids, like if you saw it when you were 8, when you were a kid, you would be, 13 years old by that point? There's a lot of life changes that go on between 8 and 13. So weird they waited so long for it.
Right.
One of the things that I thought was pretty actually cool right off the bat was to see the chi of the other masters turn into like these live action versions of themselves, but they're all in jade and they do Kai's bidding. That was really creative right off the bat. And I did not expect to ever see Oogway again and to see them fighting in like the spirit realm. Interesting way to open this movie. Subverted my expectations.
Yeah, I remember we noted with the last couple of movies, they have animated opening, but it's not, in CGI. It's a different form of it. The first one opened with 2D animation. The second one opened with more like shadowboxing animation. This one goes back to that just your standard 3D animation, but has a bigger, much different feel to it because we are, we're in the spirit realm, right? So they kind of have a bit of creative freedom when it comes to something like that than I guess what they would have not in that area. So it's just a fight between Master Oogway and Kai where we're introduced to our villain again, and we kind of learn what his goal is right at the beginning. But yeah, it's an interesting way to start off this movie, but I gotta say right off the bat, this movie looks really good. Like, they've all looked good. But this one has a bit of a different like feel to it when it comes to how it wants to present its colors and whatnot. And it looks really good. And I would dare say the best looking of the three. And they've just continually gotten better in my mind.
I would absolutely agree with you. The best looking of the three. The animation has improved. Their character movements are very fluid. I'm looking at Shifu and I'm comparing Shifu in my mind with what we saw in 1, and there really is a night and day difference with how much they've improved on this. And it is interesting because they don't quite do the 2D animation or even really much creativity as we saw with the first two. I will say there are segments though where they don't really go 3D. They kind of do this in the final training montage, for instance. There's this fantastic 3D 2D blend where it's almost like a watercolor painting in some ways, while it still feels very grounded with that kind of 3D animation. So at times they do something unique throughout this movie with the animation, which I really liked.
Right. No, I absolutely agree. They definitely make it feel when you compare the first two compared to this one, I feel like this one is definitely stands out more than those first two do. Those first two have very similar tones. They have very similar color palettes. This one feels a lot more colorful, a lot more kid friendly, dare I say it. It feels a lot more, even sometimes inviting, depending on how you look at it. So I gotta say, for the most part, I feel like, as a visual standpoint, this one is by far a step above the other two. They still look good. They still look great. Don't get me wrong. But in terms of like for instance, in the spirit realm, you get a lot of yellow in the background. And there are also times, like you mentioned, where it's like a 3D, 2D blend where the background is just like a solid color versus what's happening in the foreground. Does a lot to kind of make it stand out, make it pop. That's something I really enjoyed seeing it this time around. I wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting this one to be just like the other two that we've seen before, which I would have been totally okay with. But they go a different route, and I kind of enjoy that.
I think also with the environments, they're striving for some more realism here. Whereas I think there was limitations with how much they could do with the environments for the first one particularly. It looked a little more cartoonish, but not in a bad way. It looked more like a painting sometimes. Whereas this one, like with the Panda Village, and when Crane and Mantis are out in the desert and they find this like abandoned ship in the desert, it's really weird. Just some more, I would say, grounded. Like even with the snow, with Poe and Dad's journey, it feels like we're finally in more of a realistic world. Like these colorful characters are traversing through something that looks like that you might actually find in reality. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I noted that in the last one, that, it was kind of fun to move somewhere outside of the village. This one feels like it's moving even way more outside that, almost like it's moving to a different continent because of all the places that they go, right? There's, of course, the village at the beginning with, which looks a lot different than before. But also they go to, like you mentioned, out in the desert. There's like this ship that's run aground. Then they also, of course, you have the Panda Village, the Panda community, which is up in the snowy mountains, which looks amazing. So they go a lot of places in this, and not just the color palette, but also locations that they build, and stuff like that. Again, by far the best looking of the three. I was really excited to see, where else are we going to go? Because we are started off with a brand new location, the Spirit Realm. Then we go to the village. Then we go to the Panda community. Then we go to the desert. There's a number of places that this movie goes, and every place I'm like really excited to see what it's going to look like. And this movie again looks very, very good. It
does. And as far as like a story perspective goes, I do like that, this feels like a logical progression from the second one. Shifu is growing older. Poe is the dragon warrior. It's time he does take on more responsibility, and it makes sense that he would go on now to start teaching the lessons. It doesn't quite make sense that he's teaching the Furious Five, since they've been training longer than them. I would have liked to have seen some new recruits, maybe some new people for them to start training in the beginning, and he's worried about training them, but I digress. Nevertheless, I do like to see that at least the comedy aspect is coming back into this series, particularly when Lee and Poe don't realize they're father and son. It's just so obviously true that they're father and son, and then it's completely ironic they don't even realize it. I like more of that kind of dry British humor where it's just really obvious, and that's what makes it funny. And then I do think it's funny that Mr. Ping, his adopted father, gets more to do in this movie than before. He's always just kind of popped in the beginning and end, and now he tags along with them on the journey. And there's quite a bit of heart-to-heart going on here throughout this movie about what it means to be a parent and what it means to be a son, especially if you're reconnecting with, a long-lost parent or something. A little more than I was expecting here.
Yeah, I will say we'll talk about comedy in a bit.
We'll talk about that in a bit, okay?
yeah. Well, I feel like the comedy in all three of these movies is always something that we have to talk about. But yeah, they do go a lot of different places. Logical progression. This is very much a story about self-discovery. The first one was about, fulfilling your destiny. The second one was about learning where you came from and the legacy that your parents leave behind for you. this one's about self-discovery, right? Finding out who you really are. And that's a big topic for this movie. And we'll talk about that in a second too. But I think that that's also, again, kind of, if you've been growing up with Kung Fu Panda, I think it kind of makes sense to go down this route. Kind of like what you were saying, where, if you're growing up with Kung Fu Panda, where you've seen the first one when you're a kid, and you've watched the second one when it came out, and now you're seeing this one, I think it makes sense to go down this path of self-discovery, since around this time, definitely those who would be watching this, who have followed it, would be teenagers at this point.
Now, one of the routes I didn't quite expect the story to take is exploring Oogway's backstory. Come to find out, our enemy here, General Kai, was Oogway's brother in arms, you could say. And we kind of have another scenario of a bad seed gone wrong, where last time it was fireworks, this time it's chi, which feels a little bit more interesting than fireworks, I guess. But they do turn against each other. I couldn't help but think this is kind of the plot of season 1, episode 11 of Thundercats, the Ghost Warrior, where Jaga and I don't remember what his name is. Not Pantho. Anyways, I don't remember. But they were brothers that fought together, and then they fight apart. It's a great episode. Check it out. Alan and I actually brought it up in our review of Godzilla vs. Kong, hoping that the director of that movie will incorporate aspects of that episode into the movie. But nevertheless, once again, we have kind of seen this before, where they are like friends and then they become enemies and whatnot. I wasn't expecting Oogway's backstory, but I do like that they are at least incorporating the pandas. The pandas are the ones that teach him how to use chi, and because now we understand, because, gosh, I'm getting these characters' names confused. Shen wiped out the pandas.
Yeah.
Shifu never really learned how to use chi, and I do think they smartly incorporate that, I'll say.
Yeah. I'm glad that, we finally get to know what happened with the pandas, because we know that they were killed by Shen, or for the most part. But at the end of the second one, they're all of a sudden just there at the very end of the story. So you're right. I think it's kind of smart to also pull in Oogway, because this feels like it's the end of a trilogy. This feels like it's almost like the end of Kung Fu Panda, even though we'll kind of talk about that at the end of the podcast, where it's going to go from here. Because you're bringing in Oogway to begin with, who, passed away in the first one. You're finding out, Po is, starting to become the Dragon Warrior more and more, and he's given the role of training the Furious Five. So, and he's going to come and figure out, who he really is. So it feels like this is very much setting up for, at least in the beginning here, very much setting up for like the end of Kung Fu Panda. And we finally get to see Po really become the Dragon Warrior. And that was one of the things too. I was kind of scared that this would go down, this path of, Po would completely lose himself in, the idea of being the Dragon Warrior, that he loses what it means to be the Dragon Warrior. I think while that's there, they don't really go down that route, because that really is a cliche route to go down, where, you just kind of become self-obsessed with who you really are, or, what your title is. So I'm glad they didn't go down that route. They went down, a smarter one, where it's Po trying to find out who he is. And at the end of the story, because he finds out, he's able to figure out who he really is, he's able to take on that role completely of the Dragon Warrior and become an all-powerful Kung Fu master.
That is cool to see Po actually become the Dragon Warrior at the end, with the giant dragon around him in the spirit realm, and then he comes back in that really awesome pose, which is definitely a callback to the very opening of the first movie, about how he's dressed and how he thinks of himself. And yeah, they are kind of pulling from the first movie, where when they open up the dragon scroll, Po realizes it's like a reflection. It's what's inside you. So that's basically what he teaches everyone, is he teaches them to use what their strengths already are, and how they could use those for, I don't know, combat, I suppose, for the greater good. Alan, I know you talked about Jackie Chan's character Monkey last time being your favorite. I want to know, what did you think of him this time? Because I think he gets the most lines here than he ever has gotten in the entire trilogy.
Yeah, I think you're right. He definitely gets a lot more lines here. I don't think he is necessarily as funny as the last movie. They definitely didn't write him out to be as funny, I felt. But you're right. He does get more lines here, which I'm kind of happy about, because even in the first one, I liked him a lot. But yeah, this time around, he's not as funny. But again, I don't think that they necessarily wrote him out to be more of the comedic relief, kind of like what was last time.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, I was surprised. I think they did some gutsy things here, especially towards the end of the movie. When Shifu's chi is taken, Shifu himself becomes a pawn of General Kai. And then Poe's sacrifice, where Poe seemingly temporarily sacrifices his life, using the whooshy finger hold to transport him into the spirit realm, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because he still has the chi, so he could just transport back to Earth if he wanted to. So it wasn't like some devastating thing that Poe did, but Poe was giving the Dragon Warrior powers there to defeat him. But the one thing that I was thinking of, Alan, I was thinking of you. Yeah. Your question has been answered. Now you know what happened to Tai Lung after the whooshy fingerhold was performed on him. He was transported to the spirit realm. Now, we don't see him there, but we know that's what happened to him.
Yeah, it took him almost 10 years to answer that question. What happened to Tai Lung? Yeah. I was waiting. I was waiting to see Tai Lung in the spirit realm. Now that we know, especially when Poe wrapped his arms around Kai and brought them both to the spirit realm. I was wondering, would we get to see Tai Lung here? No, we don't, which is fine, but I was kind of sad about that, to be honest.
So, speaking of things that you're kind of sad about, I've got some things. You wanna talk about them?
Yeah, which one do you want to go with first?
Okay, let's just go for it right now. Humor for me. Yeah. It's, for the most part, a very mixed bag. I think some things got a laugh out of me, a lot didn't. I think of all three movies, the humor did not land for me most in this one.
I would absolutely agree. I think this one, at least for me, the thing that really kind of hurt it was repetition. There were a number of jokes where they just kept hammering it and to the point where it was just like, why are you throwing this joke in here? A great example is, I forget when it happens, but there's a scene, one of the jokes is, there's an old lady in the background and something gets thrown at her and she goes, oh, and falls over, right? Yeah. The first time it's pretty funny. It's like, okay, that's kind of funny. And then it happens like 3 or 4 more times. And by the 5th time it happens, it's just like, okay, it's not funny anymore. Why are you still doing that joke? I think that's like a common theme with a number of these jokes, is they just kind of keep happening over again, and kind of really drag it down, at least for me.
That is funny you mentioned that, because in my notes I put repetitive humor is aimed towards kids this time instead of all ages. Yeah. And so we use the exact same word. It is repetitive because that's what kids find funny, is you really have to hammer home some of these jokes sometimes to get through to them. And it is very basic humor for the most part this time around. There's a couple things I found funny, but at a certain point, I do become very frustrated with their usage of humor, because I think they rely on it too much, almost like a crutch, because everything has to end with a punchline. Humor is almost always subverting something that I'm like, that is really cool. This is a really cool moment to just enjoy here. And then Poe has to open his eyes and say something really dumb and goofy or act ridiculous. And I really hate it how he has to like call out everything on screen as if this audience is like really dumb all of a sudden, even though critics and audiences of all ages have been in critics of all ages. There are not children critics, I guess, unless maybe your child is a critic of movies.
Right.
But nevertheless, like when Poe becomes a dragon warrior, he's like, see, I'm a dragon warrior. See the literal dragon behind me? And then when he returns to Earth, he has to make a joke afterwards. And I'm like kind of wrapped up in the moment until he pulls me out of it with his humor. Just really disappointing. They really kind of ruined it here in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there are a couple of funny lines. I have one written down here, which is, I think, by Shifu.
Okay.
It's when he's looking for a scroll, looking for the jade scroll that he ends up finding, which tells the story. There's a funny line here. He goes, "There's so much wisdom in here, I can't find anything," which they get a laugh out of me. But you're right. And kind of going along with, I mentioned a bit earlier, this movie has a different feel of tone to it compared to the last ones, and how you mentioned that this movie's kind of aimed more towards children. I feel like this one definitely is playing it a bit more safe this time around. The last few have kind of, for example, the second one I think is the darkest out of the three of them, which isn't even saying a whole lot. But there is the word kill is in that movie a number of times, and we do see Shin get crushed by a cannon, right?
Yeah.
And in the first one, Tai Lung does get sent to the spirit realm, and of course we don't know that until now. But we don't see him at all after the Wuxi finger hold happens. So this movie does kind of play with that idea that, it's PG, so it does kind of, at least push that a little bit more. That of death is a thing that happens in these movies. This one feels a little bit different. This one, it feels like they're playing it a bit too safe. This one feels a bit more squishy. It feels a bit more kid friendly. And I don't really know how to feel about that, because I think that with this change in tone, it kind of begins to take away, at least for me, what I ended up really liking about Kung Fu Panda to begin with, is that it's an action movie, a kid's action movie that has some really cool action, but it's still funny at times.
Yeah, I mean, the way I saw it was the first two movies are for like people of all ages could find something to enjoy here. I really do think they're aiming a lot of this at children. I mean, just think about when Po goes to the village, they introduce a lot of children pandas that he uses to help. Yep. And there's that guy with the crooked teeth. There's that guy that gives out a lot of hugs all the time. I'm just sitting here thinking this is a lot of humor I could see kids laughing at and getting a lot of enjoyment out of. Me, not necessarily. But the other things that I was a little disappointed with is for all the time we spend on character relationships, which is like almost a majority of the movie, I was a little surprised that like Poe's mother's death is brought up but not explained how the father is alive, considering he stayed back to fight, yet he lived where she ran away and died. I'm a little disappointed that if we're going to go there, then you really got to explain a little bit more. How did the father escape? How are all the rest of these pandas still alive if Shin supposedly killed all of them? But he didn't. I don't know. I feel like we're missing some stuff here.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think maybe their focus is, I'm starting to pick this up the more I think about it. Kung Fu Panda 3 is really a Kung Fu Panda for a different audience. Mm-hmm. The first two, it feels like the first two, they followed one another, right? Where the same audience would probably be more likely to go see Kung Fu Panda 2 after seeing the first one. Now it's been a number of years since the release of Kung Fu Panda 3. And while I mentioned a little bit ago, it's a logical progression to take the character of Po down this route of self-discovery, given who had been watching Kung Fu Panda 1 back in 2008 to watch it again here now. It feels like it's made more for kids, made more for a different audience. It's not as mature as before. It's not as, not as, I guess, violent, I guess we could say, as before. It's already PG, so it's not like they went for a G route, which would be really weird for a movie like this.
Yeah.
But I feel that there is definitely a route where they're wanting to take it down for a different audience, a younger audience, instead of one to kind of keep maturing with its audience from the second one.
I think you're exactly right, because when the first one comes out, I am between 12 and 13 years old. There's still enough there to capture my attention, but by the time the third one comes out, I'm 21 years old. I'm an adult. I think they're just kind of thinking our original audience for the first Kung Fu Panda, maybe even the second one at this point, is gone. So that's why this one doesn't rely a lot I think what this one does, it kind of is a rehash of a lot of elements of the first one, because I think they're expecting audiences who are coming into this one may not be familiar with the first one. They may not even have been the same people that saw the first one. And so that's why I noticed a lot of the original movies jokes are replayed here. Some of the stuff is just rehashed. And for me, I didn't find it very exciting. I'll be honest, I did clock watch a lot more in this one, where I'm kind of like, okay, where are we going here? What's going on?
Right, yeah, I agree. And I mean, luckily these films aren't too long.
No.
You literally could watch all three of these in an afternoon.
Yep.
I think all in all is like 4.5 hours, if that. They're all pretty short. This movie also has a much different pace to it. This one moves a million miles an hour. It goes fast. At least comparatively to the first two. I didn't necessarily have a problem with that. At least it has it so it's never really a dull moment. But when you kind of latch on top of that, the humor, which we noted is very repetitive, and does replay a number of things, it does kind of start to get a bit old after a while. But, you know, at least it has again, I guess I kind of like that it's changing pace a little bit, making that, you know, how Kung Fu Panda movie is supposed to feel, making it go a little bit of a different route in terms of tone. But I gotta say, for a third movie, that, as we noted with the scores, even though they were technically lower than last time, they weren't significantly lower. I was kind of, I didn't really know what I was expecting. I was expecting something a little bit different than this.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I was too, considering that the Rotten Tomatoes audience score is exactly the same as the first one. And the cinema score is better than the first one. So I was expecting a lot more too. I mean, he goes to the Panda Village in the second act. I gotta be honest, Alan, I almost don't remember any of the second act. I found it to be quite boring, and there's only so many train the villagers for the impending attack montages that I can take until they just all start to blend together. I'm honestly very confused with the choices they make here, because they introduced Mei Mei as a character, as a possible love interest for Po, and that's thrown out the window immediately. She doesn't become any kind of character that he can rely on, which I think is a bad idea by a third movie. I think our character needs some kind of a love interest. I mean, that's what happens in almost all these other animated movies. And it really does become, I'm honestly shocked. The movie actually just becomes mostly a family character drama. It's like ordinary people, Kung Fu Panda style. It's really weird, where he's caught between his adopted father, his real father, the loss of his mother. Where is his place? And Kai is almost an afterthought. We see him in the beginning. We see him once more take the chi of Mantis and Crane and three other characters out in the desert. We need to see him rampaging through China. He needs to feel like more of a threat. And then we see him, I think we only see him really 4 times in this movie. And then he takes he takes Shifu's chi, and he destroys the Jade Temple, which I wasn't really too emotionally attached to anyways. And then somehow Tigress knows where the secret panda village is to find Po. Honestly, I found the second act to be quite boring for me. And I'm kind of frustrated, because a lot of the times they're talking about how Kai is ambushing people, Shifu is getting these letters. It's all shown and not told. For this kind of a movie, you need to show Kai doing this stuff. You cannot focus this much on. I'm honestly surprised how well this kept kids' attention in the second act of Po just hanging out with this family in the Panda Village, and that's really it.
Yeah. You know, I gotta say too, with all this talk, so kind of going back to what I mentioned a little bit ago, where, you know, the first movie was about fulfilling your destiny. The second movie was about finding out where you came from. This movie's about self-discovery, right? Kung Fu Panda has not been known for its subtlety, right? None of these movies I feel are very subtle, and I'm not really expecting them to be. They're kids' movies. So it's whatever. This one, I felt like they really preached this message of, self-discovery and being the best you can be and all this stuff, way more than I think that they really need to. Because their Poe like legitimately comes out at one point and says, "I don't even know who I am," as if to say that this is the lesson he needs to learn is find out who he is. Then he can really be the Dragon Warrior. Again, they're not known. None of these movies are known for their subtlety. But this one, I feel, just really hammers home, what this was really about, and which is self-discovery for Poe.
Yeah, it's just right in your face, which leads me to believe they are catering more towards a younger audience that needs this kind of stuff spoon-fed to them. But I will say I can only take this self-discovery so much, considering that's the plot of all three films. Poe comes to find out he's a Dragon Warrior, that he is worthy in the first one. In the second one, he realizes his heritage, that he's really not the last. He's not alone. And then in the third one, we get to see, okay, now what does he do now that it's actually come to life with his heritage, with his father? How does he balance this life, while still being the Dragon Warrior? I don't know. I will say maybe it's because I essentially watched 2 and 3 back to back. I watched 2 on one night and then I watched 3 the next day. It's a lot. That feels very repetitive and very much in my face. And at a certain point, I feel like we're kind of resolved in this by the end of like this, at least by the second one. And then by the third one, I feel like how many times can we go down this path of self-exploration? It's a lot.
I mean, it's always been an element, but it's like the main focus for this one.
Yeah, it really is the main focus for this one. I gotta know, Alan, because I know you really liked Lord Shen from the second one. What do you think of General Kai?
So the reason why I liked Lord Shen so much last time was because he was very much an emotional thorn for Poe, right? Because he's the thing who's standing kind of in the way of Poe learning who he really is, or learning where he came from, right? What happened to his parents, yada, 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 right? We talked about all that last week. That was why I liked him so much, was because he was kind of formidable foe, right? He was one that I felt like had more of an attachment when it came to our main character. This time around, they're really going for Kung Fu's at risk. You could lose all of Kung Fu if you don't defeat Kai, which has kind of been a running thing since kind of the first one too, that defend what Kung Fu is, right? It comes back with this one again. I don't necessarily care. I think he's a cool looking villain. And it definitely has a sweet voice because it is J.K. Simmons. So I think at the end of the day, I ended up not really caring too much for this villain, because in terms of what he means to our main character, there's not a whole lot outside of fulfilling his destiny to become really the Dragon Warrior, which has no emotional weight to our main character, which is weird to say because it's a movie about a Kung Fu Panda, right? There shouldn't be, I wouldn't think at least that there would have been any emotional like drama when it came to, fulfilling what Poe was going to do. But when we have what happened in the second movie, now I'm kind of expecting it at this point, right? I'm expecting it to go more for an emotional route, which it really doesn't do in this one. So I think he's a cool villain in terms of looks, but in terms of my favorite villains, he's probably on the bottom of the list.
I definitely agree. I'm completely with you. To me, it shows that they've kind of mined all of their ideas for the series. And this is, to me, why it doesn't seem like much of a surprise it took so long for this third one to come out, is because originally in the first one, Tai Lung is the black sheep. He is the disregarded apprentice of Shifu and Oogway. And so he's kind of coming home to reclaim what is his. So there's directly an emotional concern there. With the second one, Shin and Poe are directly tied together because Shin murdered Poe's mother, and at the same time, it would be Poe who would be his downfall. Very cool kind of how that story weaves together. This one, if we're going to have to go back to Oogway, who wasn't even barely even mentioned in the second one, and we're going to have to figure out it's his enemy and his friend from 500 years ago, and they literally bring back Oogway in the spirit realm, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not buying it. I don't have any attachment to this villain. And I really think they know they've got a weak villain. That's why he's in barely any of the movie. Far less than Shin was. Maybe even Tai Lung. I don't know. But the villain, he looks cool. His blades are a rip-off of Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, which was kind of annoying. I've just watched all the Mortal Kombat movies recently. I will say, though, I think his blades might be a reference to the first one. They might have been on display. That really cool move when Tai Lung like kicks one of the blades and Shifu kind of uses his paws to like kind of push it into the ground. That very well could have been a callback. I think it actually is. But yeah, this villain is really boring. There's really not much to him. I don't care about his mission of, I think it's kind of cool. He's taking all the chi from the masters. Too bad we almost never see it. And there's no emotional connection, because in the first one, Tai Lung was supposed to be the dragon warrior, but now he has to face Po. This one, this guy is like, oh, I guess I gotta defeat you too to do it. And of course we have the dumb villagers come out and defeat the bad guy, villager style, I guess. Not crazy about it. And especially the way he goes out. Gives him all the chi. It's too much. It's too much.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
all I can think of is Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Give me all the power.
I was just about to say that. It really reminds me of Crystal Skull, which is, I don't know how good a comparison that is.
I hate this. They do the same thing in Ang Lee's Hulk, where they give him all the power and it's too much power. I mean, what a letdown.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. They even have to reuse the whooshy finger hold from the first one. I think they've run out of ideas.
Yeah, that was one where I kind of expected it, because it's, we're already having a bunch of callbacks to that first movie.
Yeah, like too many.
I'm sure they're going to pull out the whooshy finger hold at some point. So to pull it out to bring Kai to the spirit realm makes logical sense because of everything else that we have. It doesn't work, obviously. That one was kind of giving me, I felt. When it all goes according to plan, I was like, surely this is not going to be that easy. So.
Yeah, I mean, at least I like that, because that seems like the unstoppable move. He is now way too overpowered. Whereas in, they didn't even bring it up in the second one, but at least he's like, I'm not alive. It only works on people that are alive, which is kind of confusing because he used it on Tai Lung to send him to the spirit realm. And if Kai is from the spirit realm, then why wouldn't that work to send him back to the spirit realm? Anyways, I don't know. All I'm saying is, this movie's kind of out of ideas. And ultimately, like I said, Alan, I'm clock watching a lot. I'm kind of just struggling to find reasons to stay invested with this third installment. Well, Alan, I think I know where you're going to go with this one, but it might go either way. I don't know. I'm curious. What is your rating and recommendation for Kung Fu Panda 3?
So Kung Fu Panda 3, I've always, like I mentioned, always seemed to evade it over the number of years that it's been out. I've been meaning to watch it, never actually got around to doing it until now, finally, when we had to for this review. I gotta say, I didn't know what to expect. I heard good things, but that was a number of years ago. So watching it now, it's definitely the weakest of the three Kung Fu Pandas, I feel. I think it has some good elements to it. I think this movie definitely is the best looking, the best animated of all the three of them. But it's definitely all around not the best. In fact, definitely the weakest of them all. This does, I think, falls a bit too short especially when it comes to trying to make too many callbacks and repetition with its jokes really kind of make it fall flat for me. I'm not necessarily, I don't care that it's going for a different audience, but I do care when, it's supposed to go down a route where I feel it doesn't really belong. This movie just feels different, and I don't know how much I really enjoy that. So I think it's a logical step to go down this route of self-discovery for the character of Poe, but you don't need to, hammer it in my face that Poe, this is what his journey is going to end up. This is what he's here for. This is what this movie's all about, is self-discovery. So at the end of the day, I think Kung Fu Panda 3 is a fine movie, which is unfortunate because the other two have been good. This one, I think it's just fine. So I'm going to land on a 6, but I'm going to go ahead and say it's not a recommend for me. I honestly didn't gain much from watching it. So there you go.
Kung Fu Panda 3 is a letdown for me. While the animation is the best of the trilogy, the new voice actors are a welcome addition, and Poe's final character arc is good. I just found myself struggling to keep interest. There's less action, the humor is a complete mixed bag, or even just on the side of just being too kiddish for me, and there's just a bit too much focus on character relationships. General Kai is an underutilized villain who's not much of a menace to anyone, except for the end of the movie. While there's not much wrong with this movie on an objective level, I personally found myself struggling to get through it. I can understand why audiences and critics like this movie, but for me, the series has finally overstayed its welcome when they have to rehash things from the first film. It just doesn't have the charm of the original, nor feel original in any way. I like seeing Poe reunited with his dad, and the lessons of parenthood and family these characters learn along the way. I think families will find some enjoyment out of this one, and maybe it's because I watched 2 and 3 in such close succession. Maybe if I would have waited nearly 5 years in between sequels, I would enjoy it much more. But Kung Fu Panda 3 receives 5 stars out of 10 with a mild not recommend.
Fair enough. So can we say that this trilogy kind of went out with the
It went out with an which is really disappointing considering how strong the first 2 films were, at least we thought. And I do feel like our expectations were set up a little bit considering how high of ratings this third one has. And then come to find out, neither of us really liked it all that much. Neither of us recommend this one of the trilogy.
Right. Well, do we want to go for rankings? See where we stack up between the trilogy?
For me, it's pretty easy. It's straight down the line. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, mine's a little bit messed up. 2, 1, 3. 2 by far for me is the best, but 1 is definitely still a good one.
Yeah, the other thing that I said I would talk about in this review is there are some short films. I personally found the one that came out 2012 that was attached to the second film, Secrets of the Scroll. I found that to be pretty good. That was actually a prequel telling how the Furious Five came to be at the Jade Temple. Now there is Secrets of the Masters, which is another prequel that retells the story a little differently, and I didn't quite get to Secrets of the something. So I will say, if I'm going to throw in at least Secrets of the Scroll, I put Secrets of the Scroll above the third one. I think it's worth checking out if you want to dive a little deeper into the backstory in this universe for the other characters.
Gotcha. Well, is this one that you would pick up on Blu-ray? Would you pick it up to complete the collection, or you just going to pass on by it?
So the completionist in me and the practicality, like being frugal, it financially makes more sense to buy the trilogy than it would to just buy the first 2 movies. That would just be more expensive. It actually is cheaper to just buy the trilogy. But actually, I found a DreamWorks collection, which I want to pick up. It's $60. It's all of the Shrek movies, all of the How to Train Your Dragon movies, Puss in Boots, Kung Fu Panda, I think a couple others as well. For $60, it's a pretty good deal. So actually, I would pick that up. So technically, yes, I would pick this one up. But if it wasn't a part of like any sort of collections or packs, then I wouldn't get this one.
Gotcha. Yeah, I usually like to buy individual Blu-rays instead of box sets. But yeah, it is kind of hard. I looked around a little bit. It is kind of hard to get your hands on without just getting the trilogy or like you mentioned, the DreamWorks pack. So technically, I'll probably get it at some point because I know I really do want to get this trilogy, or at least the first two, and 3 just might come along with it because of its trilogy. But
Yeah.
if I could just pick up like just the first 2, I'm usually okay with, not owning everything in a series, usually. So I would probably skip on this one.
Yeah. I will say this one makes more sense why you would get the trilogy, since a 6 isn't too far off from a 7 from which is what you rated the first movie. So yeah, I mean, I should say real quick, our generals, like our, what do we want to call them, the average scores, we both have the same average score for the series. We both give it a 7 out of 10. So for the trilogy, that's technically a recommend for the trilogy, averaging out the scores, which is kind of funny because I will say you liked it slightly better than me since you gave it a 6. And I gave it a 5, but they're pretty close scores.
Yeah, that makes sense. So after seeing this, Corbin, what would you recommend listeners would watch?
I'm going to recommend another DreamWorks film. I'm going to recommend The Road to El Dorado.
Oh, that's a good one.
Which is kind of made me think of this one, how they're journeying to a secret land, and there's a bad guy they got to defeat, and they're kind of posers. So I feel like DreamWorks is kind of cribbing off of themselves at certain points. I noted that with Kung Fu Panda 2, cribbing off of The Prince of Egypt. Nevertheless, I love The Road to El Dorado. Check that one out. I'm also going to recommend something much more adult. I'm going to be recommending Mortal Kombat Scorpion's Revenge, which is a rated R animated movie that's super violent, but if you want to check out some kung fu, some really good voice acting, and some interesting world building, check that one out. I enjoyed it. It's not for everybody. It really earns its R rating.
Gotcha. I have just one recommendation, Kubo and the Two Strings. This is a movie by Leica Studios, so it's not 3D animated, but it's claymation animated. Looks freaking gorgeous. A great looking movie. That has a similar feel in terms of like, older ancient Chinese kinds of things. So I would say definitely check that one out. I almost recommended it last week, but I just said, no, I got to save it for the end. So that's a good one. I have actually never finished it. I tried watching it on my plane ride to Israel, but I kept falling asleep, so I never got through it. So I've never actually watched it. You should definitely see it. I actually kind of want to know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I want to check it out. I really like Leica films, so I'm sure I'll enjoy it. I can't wait to check it out.
Well, after Kung Fu Panda 3 came out, as I noted in the background, Kung Fu Panda, or not the franchise, but DreamWorks moved to a different distributor, this time NBC Universal. So Jeffrey Katzenberg has come on record saying, whatever happens to Kung Fu Panda is up to Universal Studios. There were plans to have it be 6 in the series. As clearly we can see, there's only been 3 so far. So who knows if Kung Fu Panda will come back? This really does feel like the end of a trilogy. End of almost of Poe's journey. And I think that they said that they're pretty much not going to do another movie without Poe in it. So we'll see if Kung Fu Panda ever comes back. My guess is probably at some point it will. But that's the current state of it. It's kind of just sitting in limbo right now after this third film.
Yeah, we should note the Nickelodeon series was going on when this third film came out. It was actually coming to a close. Kung Fu Panda Legends of Awesomeness ended 5 months after the third film came out. And actually, Alan, there was a new Kung Fu Panda TV show that just ended 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yep. It was an Amazon original, Kung Fu Panda, The Paws of Destiny. It was only one season. Part 1 premiered November 16th, dropping the first 13 episodes, and Part 2 came back July 5th, 2019, concluding its 26-episode run. I would be curious to see what Amazon did with the Kung Fu Panda series, but I agree with you, Alan. I have a feeling we won't be seeing Poe back on the big screen probably ever again. I mean, we got 3 How to Train Your Dragon movies. We got like 4 Shrek films, I think.
Yep.
3 Madagascar movies. DreamWorks seems to work in trilogies, but the Shrek IP was like way, way more popular than Kung Fu Panda ever was. But I think Kung Fu Panda's done on the big screen, at least for now. Maybe we'll get something on the small screen, but we've had a lot of that so far. I don't think it's ever coming back.
Well, listeners, the question out of the show is this: spirit realm or the moral realm? Mortal realm, not the moral realm. Which one would you rather be in? It's like, maybe the spirit realm for me. It seems kind of cool. You can kind of float around and do whatever.
Yeah, I think the spirit realm looks cool because it looks like a sandbox video game where you can destroy stuff, you can float around, you can have epic battles with your long deceased enemies. Yep. Yeah, it looks really fun to me, especially if you're able to go back and forth. According to Master Oogway, he doesn't know whether he could go back to the mortal realm. He never tried it, but we clearly know that Poe did it, and Kai was able to harness enough chi to transport back to the mortal realm. Right. But for me, I'm with you, Alan. We're going to be duking it out together in the spirit realm.
All right. All right, listeners. Well, next week we're going to be doing Air Force One with Harrison Ford back in 1997. This was going to go along with Top Gun, but they moved Top Gun Maverick, and we had an open spot for it, so we decided might as well do it next week. So after we do Air Force One, we'll be hopping right into Space Jam, leading right up to the release of Space Jam: A New Legacy. So you will not want to miss that. So we'll see you next week with Air Force One.
Hey listeners, it's Corbin. Don't forget to check out the exciting links in the description below that will connect you with more great movie reviews for your listening pleasure, and our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter page, and of course our official website where you can read great articles and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Also, if you want exclusive bonus content such as extra movie reviews, movie commentaries, and our thoughts on the latest movie news and trailers, plus more, then check out our Patreon page. It's a great way to help keep this show free, and it gives you great content that's yours to keep. All of that and more is found in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe whether you're on YouTube, Apple, Google, or Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. And while you're at it, please leave us a 5-star review so other movie lovers can more easily find our podcast. We love talking about movies, and we love talking about them with you. So don't forget to share with your friends and family, and we'll see you next week, listeners. The Silver Screen Guide podcast is edited and produced by Allen and Corbin. Intro and outro music is created by Thomas Rankin. The thoughts and opinions herein expressed are those of the individual and do not necessarily represent those held by Silver Screen Guide. Silver Screen Guide is not affiliated with any company or individual involved with the creation of this movie or TV show. No portion of the podcast may be used without express written permission from Silver Screen Guide.
He stole from the other masters. With it, he can return to the mortal realm to steam post chi. Nice. Yeah, I gotta say, what was I gonna say?